It's Weighing In, NJ.com's high school wrestling podcast.
How's it going, everyone? Ryan Patti from NJ.com, joined as always by my three fellow New Jersey high school wrestling experts in Bill Evans, Joe Zedalis, and Jake Aferiat. And you're listening to episode number 9 of Weighing In, your go-to New Jersey high school wrestling podcast. We've reached the end of the road. Tomorrow is the start of the state championships in Atlantic City, and the four of us will be posted up in the nosebleeds of Boardwalk Hall first thing in the morning on Thursday. Most of this episode is going to be previewing everything AC from 106 to heavyweight. But before we start going weight by weight here and breaking down the brackets and what exactly could happen with each weight, we have to start the episode with the latest on the Anthony Knox front. And when I talked to you guys last Tuesday, the NJSIA had just handed down the suspension that banned him from the rest of the postseason. And since then, he took the NJSIA to court, and his lawyer, Patrick Jennings, who is very good at his job. I've known that going back to the Rashawn Gary case, which is almost a decade ago now. He got Knox a temporary restraining order that would allow him to wrestle through the rest of the postseason. And the NJSAA is currently appealing that ruling. And you knew they would, because it's almost impossible for them to swallow this ruling if they lose it. They have a rule book. They put out a rule book every year, and that rule book has gotten taken to court seemingly every year the past 4 or 5 years. And you have a case right now where a kid went up in the stands to participate in an altercation. And listen, Knox made his statement. You know, he said he was defending his family. I think a lot of us would defend our families, but what he did is obviously not allowed. And what he did got him charged with simple assault this morning, this Tuesday morning. And now the court can either say, we knew that this was possible already when we granted him the restraining order, and we have to abide by due process and let Knox, explain himself and fight the charge. Or they could say, this charge, he can't wrestle with this charge. We're revoking the restraining order and he's banned. It's what's it going to be here? We're by the time you guys listen to this tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning, we could have a decision. It could be any time Wednesday. And Joe, we're going to start with you, just because we started with you last time with the Knox news, and you were at Region 7 at Lacey. What'd you take note of there, and what do you make of everything that's happened the past couple of days here?
Yes, I was at Region 7 at Lacey last week, and the judge's ruling came down less than an hour before weigh-ins. He weighed in, he vanished. He showed up 5-10 minutes before he was supposed to wrestle on Friday night, went out, scored one of his patented technical falls. He was followed out a back door to the gymnasium by a Lacey police officer, tore down the hall, went out, exited the school, and vanished. We believe there was a car waiting for him, without comment to the media. Saturday, he wrestled twice, won his 4th title, but again, refused to talk to reporters. And then at Lacey, they brought the 4 place winners out and handed them their medals at center mat. He got his medal and then exited the gym. He did not show up for the podium photos. He was not there for the group champions spot. So we don't really know what he's thinking. I understand his attorney probably told him, do not talk to anybody. But, that police report was really concerning, and I just wonder how that is going to affect some of the people out there who have remained Knox supporters despite the fight and the court cases and everything else that's going on, Ryan.
Yeah, really troubling news that came out of today. And, our photographer, Andy Mills, got the picture of the podium, and that's a chilling photo of him just not there. It's just a very unusual final couple steps here to the end of the Anthony Knox, the great Anthony Knox high school career, which we'll see. I mean, with how it's trending right now, it could be an upsetting one, a sad one. But like I said, we're still waiting a final ruling from the court that could come out anytime today. That's Wednesday, and we're going to see. So we're going to find out soon. But let's get into some of these weight classes here. We'll start with 106. The brackets went live Tuesday afternoon. Officially, everything was out. And at 106, I mean, St. Joe's freshman JoJo Burke has separated himself from the pack here. He's lost just 3 times, and all of those losses came out of state. He's got a major decision win over Killian Coluccio, He has a win over PJ Terranova that won St. Joe's the non-public A championship. And he's got 2 wins over Bergen Catholic freshman Matt Mulligan. And one of those wins over Mulligan was a 9-7 decision. And it's kind of the closest anyone's, contested him this season. The Terranova decision, I believe, was 8-6, but that was never really in doubt. Mulligan wrestled him really tough that second time, but I think this is a pretty balanced bracket. I'm not sure which side of the bracket's better to be on. I guess the bottom away from Burke, but I think we could see Burke and Coluccio meet again here. We know how good Coluccio is, but Burke's escape the Rock title has just been kind of a launching pad for him. Joe, what do you see here at 106?
I always love this weight class, Ryan, because it's just such a mix of experience and styles and such. In this bracket, 8 freshmen, 10 sophomores, 4 juniors, 6 seniors. And you're right, JoJo has separated himself from the pack here. I think, though, he needs to be concerned with really only 2 people in the bracket. I mean, he's already handled Sean Kenny. I mean, obviously, Matt Mulligan is excited for its 3rd chance to get him. That would be in the quarterfinals. And then there's Terranova out there, only lost 8-6. And Terranova has already hammered Killian Coluccio, the number 2 seed. I think there could be some interesting results. And here's why, because you never know how a freshman making his first appearance at Boardwalk Hall is going to react to the atmosphere. Over the years, I've had wrestlers tell me that when you get to Boardwalk Hall and you take the mat, 6 minutes seems like 6 seconds. And if you can't slow things down, you look up at the clock and there's only 10 seconds left in the 3rd period. So, but it appears that JoJo has shown tremendous poise throughout his freshman year. I'm sure he's gotten better and better as the year goes on, but, I still see it, with him and Coluccio meeting in the final, and Coluccio just hasn't had much luck against him.
On to 113, where it's similar to 106 in a way because you have a number of contenders at the top, but there's one guy leading the pack there, and that's Cam Sance of Del Barton, who was the 106-pound champ last year, and he's unbeaten this year with a Powerade title. And what makes this weight special is that if he rattled off like 15 or 16 of the kids in the weight class and said, that kid could medal, I wouldn't think that that's too far-fetched. I mean, this is a deep weight class. It goes deeper than just our individual rankings. And our individual rankings in order, it's Sance, Charlie Esposito, Anthony Mason, Zach Belverio, Marcos Hassan, Eamon Fry, Michael Daly, and Robbie Rodriguez in that order. And then you have Carmine Sipper, Tyler Hildebrandt, Mike DiBiase, Ethan Michaels, Dom DiGiacomo, Joe Viola. I mean, the list goes on. But Cam Sance here has just been far and above. And I think Anthony Mason could reverse this decision that he lost to Charlie Esposito there in the Escape the Rock tournament. And that would come in the semifinals because Esposito's the 2 and Mason's the 3. And then in the final, I mean, could we see a rematch of last year's 106-pound final with Sance and Mason? I mean, I think we could be running into that here. Jake, what do you see here?
Yeah, so, I think your point about a possible finals rematch is a good one. The thing that really intrigues me about this weight is I think a lot of guys at this bracket are going to outplace their seeds. You look at a kid like Marcos Hassan, who just cracked the rankings for us this week from Bergen. He's the 26th seed, but he is not your average 26th seed. I mean, he's a highly touted freshman. He's super accoladed. He's got a bunch of big wins this year. So, to bet against him, but he's got a tough opponent in the first round in Mike DiBiase from RBC. Carmine Sipper from Caldwell's the 11th seed. He made the blood round last year. Eamon Fry's the 14th seed. He'll have Anthony Mason in the pre-quarters, but Fry has some big wins, just cracked our rankings for the first time this year. Zach Belverio from Johnson was their first region champ since 2007. He's one of only, I think, around a dozen undefeated wrestlers left in the state. So, I think this weight, for as much as we might think the finals are a foregone conclusion and that Sance is probably going to pick up his 2nd title, I think really where this weight gets interesting is, who's going to slot in behind them on the podium and just how many of these double-digit seeds are super dangerous.
120. I look at this bracket and I think we're in for Paul Kenny versus John McGinty part 3. These 2 wrestled at the Catholic duels, and Kenny won by major decision. Then they wrestled in the Escape the Rock finals, which Bill saw, and Kenny won a much closer bout 5-4. Kenny beat McGinty once last year by major decision and has never lost to him, even going back to their youth days. And he was banged up at the non-public 8 quarters when these two matched up, but it's clear he's doing just fine now. And head coach Billy Ashnell played down the injury then, and it's clear why, because he's pinning and teching everyone so far this postseason. And McGinty's been a beast as well. And the only 2 losses he has in state are to Kenny. He beat Tommy Marchetti from Del Barton, who's having a great year, and same with Anthony Barametti from St. Peter's. He's been awesome in his first postseason there for the Marauders. McGinty also beat Anthony Piemonte last week in the region final. It was close, very close, but I mean, Piemonte, especially down, he was at 126 all year. Now he's down to 120. He's been very good this year. And then there's a lot of other names to look at this weight. A lot of them hail from South Jersey. Andre Hill, I got to see when Paulsboro came out to wrestle Hanover Park in the Group 1 semis, and he's been lethal since coming down to 120. But Christian Hoops was right there with him in last week's region tournament, and he lost a close decision, ended up getting the 16 seed this week. And to me, that's a bit of a bad break for him. When you look at Hill's seed, at 4, you wonder if Hoops wins that, where does he end up stacking up? And then, a couple other kids, Joey Polici for Paramus Catholics had, a pretty good year, pretty underrated year. And he draws Michael Lamb from Haddonfield, who's got the 20 seed here. So there's a lot of kids who have had good years. They end up with seeds where you kind of end up scratching your head, but that's sometimes what you get this time of year. And, the good thing for these kids is it's any given match this time of year. Everyone belongs here, and everyone's for the most part peaking at the right time. 126, it really all depends what happens with Knox here. I mean, we've talked about it. He's the name to beat. He will never not be the name to beat as long as he's in this field. But Nate Braun told me over the weekend that he would love to wrestle Knox before he graduates. And, Nate, the Bergen Catholic junior, he's an absolutely fearless kid. He's overcome a lot of injuries to start his high school career, and he always has made it out on the other side of them. And he's a state runner-up at 106 as a freshman. He was 3rd at 113 last year, and, he feels good at 126. He was at 132 for most of the year, but he felt smaller compared to a lot of those kids. He got hurt, he feels, because he was wrestling at that weight. But, he's had a great year, and he's down at a weight where he feels good. So we'll see what happens there. And Anthony DeAndrea from Watchung Hills is peaking at the right time here. He beat Jaden Perez again from Del Val. Colton Haggerty, he's a feisty kid. His only in-state loss is to Knox, and he gave him, everything he could handle. He got teched, but that Beast of the East match, he went out there fearless. He didn't care what happened, and he had a good first period, and then it got out of hand. But deep weight class, fun weight class. Mikey Batista from St. Joe's. Devin Ryan's a 2-time state medalist. Carter Pack from St. Augustine's had a good year. Gage Summers, Joey D'Angelo from Point Pleasant Boroughs, unbeaten. Kevin Rulin's a state medalist there from Red Bank Regional. So there's a lot of names to keep an eye on here, but there's only one to me with Anthony Knox if he does wrestle. Bill, what do you make of this weight?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, it all kind of depends on Knox, right? I mean, if he wrestles, he's going to win, but pretty clearly, unless he suffers an injury. I mean, anybody can get caught. We've seen it, but I just wouldn't predict it. Even though he would obviously be coming into this tournament, with a lot of distractions and whatnot. He still was overwhelming a favorite as you could find. Again, if he wrestles, and if he doesn't, we're looking at a lot of these matchups now, and they're all going to change because you're going to pull the number 1 seed out, and they're going to reseed it, and everything changes. So I wouldn't get too comfortable at this point if you're sitting there looking at a seed and looking at your bracket and maybe starting to prepare for your first or second round matchup. That could change tomorrow. So, but like you said, I mean, some interesting if the seeds hold. I mean, 4 or 5, Colton Haggerty, Sal Barametti met in the Beast of the East. That was the 4th time they've wrestled. They're now 2-2. That they say they always joke about, when the tournament comes out, that they're always going to end up basically, on the same side of the bracket, and that's to this point turned out to be the case. You do have Carter Pack as well, who Haggerty beat in overtime in the region final. That would be his second round matchup if seeds hold. Haggerty himself said when I asked him about the Knox situation, look, if they let him wrestle, then he should wrestle. He said if he doesn't wrestle, then you win the bracket, and everybody's going to say, well, Knox didn't wrestle, so he might as well wrestle. So I think that's probably the feeling of a lot of the kids. Whatever happens, they're not going to care one way or the other if he's in there. They're just going to go out there and take care of business. Gage Summers on that bottom half is the number 11 seed. I think is really dangerous. I think he could make a serious run out of that spot. He just barely lost the Carter Pack by a point in the region semis after losing to him 8-0 earlier this year. So I think there could be some guys on that lower bracket that could at least maybe get to the semis. As you said, Braun is probably the favorite down there, and would more than likely be a Knox-Braun final. But there's some definite intriguing matchups here throughout just about every round that we're going to be looking forward to this weekend.
Joe, what's your take on what could happen here?
First, I think Nathan Braun needs to be very careful what he wishes for. Last weekend, Knox was even more focused than usual, and those of us who have seen him know that this kid is locked in whenever he steps on a wrestling mat. And now you're taking a kid who's won every national tournament that can be won, and now he's angry, and he's wrestling angry. He just overpowered people, and you can't get him off you. So, everybody needs to hope that he doesn't wrestle if they want to have a chance to get to the number 1 spot on the podium. Otherwise, everybody's wrestling for second, because, man, he just terrorized people on Saturday.
Yeah, from talking to Braun, it feels like he just wants to, to experience the feeling of being out there with him. I'm not saying that he's going to, he's not saying I could go out there and beat him. Nate Braun's a very confident kid, but I think he just wants that experience, because I think he knows how special of, a legacy Anthony Knox, what he has. And I just think he wants to be out there with them. But moving on to 132, I mean, we've talked about this weight ad nauseum, and it's complete theater. Sammy Spalding from Camden Catholic has kind of emerged as the name to beat, because pretty much all these kids have a blemish in state, but Sammy really doesn't. The next kid that I want to talk about is Bobby Duffy, and we know about his signature moment. He put Adrian DeJesus to his back up a weight in the non-public 8 quarters. Vinny Paino, he beat Gino Shanina and Ryan DeGeorge just 3 days apart, or 4 days apart in the non-public 8 tournament. Dalton Weber beat Ryan DeGeorge last week in the Region 3 final. And then DeGeorge, he's kind of dominated Patrick O'Keefe this year, beat him 3 times. But those are the only blemishes in state for O'Keefe, who beat Nate Braun twice when Braun was at 132. He beat Gino Shanina. He beat Bobby Duffy. He beat Luke Sherlock last week. I mentioned Shanina, who won the Region 5 title. Jackson Slotnick's also at this weight. And, what does everyone at this weight have in common, besides Bobby Duffy, believe it or not, is that they're all state medalists. And Ryan DeGeorge was last year's 126-pound state champion, and Pat O'Keefe was a state finalist as a freshman. It's an absolutely ridiculous weight. Bill, I know it's one of your favorite weights. Talk about this one.
Yeah, I mean, and I just think the top half of this bracket in particular is loaded. I mean, Sammy Spalding got the top seed, but I don't think that's a gift. You might even be better off being 2 in this. I mean, you look at this, and the 8-9 match is Bobby Duffy and Jackson Slotnick. And as we said, Duffy can beat anybody. He can pin anybody. He's very explosive. And, now he could also probably lose to anybody too. He's probably maybe the biggest wild card in this. But, if that's the guy you face in the quarters, that's a very dangerous quarterfinal for Sammy Spalding. He beat Duffy 1-0 earlier this year to escape the Rock. And Slotnick, too, just took Spalding to overtime in the Region 8 finals. And Slotnick was in on a leg 3 different times. There was an incredible scramble that took almost the entire sudden victory period. If anybody has a chance, we were there to video the Region 8 finals. Go back and watch that overtime scramble, because it is amazing. And nobody scored on it. Actually, so they ended up going to tiebreaker, and Spalding won on actually a stall call. So I mean, it's that's going to be a tough quarter for him. And then the 4 or 5. You got Patrick O'Keefe, who's a former state finalist. You got Vincent Paino, who, beat Ryan DeGeorge, a state champion in the non-public A final. I mean, that's from the quarters on, and maybe even a little further than that. I mean, there's just going to be some unbelievable matchups on the top half of the bracket, which I think is a little stronger than the bottom. You have Dalton Weber there at the 2, who's a very, very good wrestler. Now, Spalding's beaten him twice, once very decisively. The other time in the non-public B final, it was 4-1, so it was a 1 takedown match. And, obviously Ryan DeGeorge is the defending state champ, but he's lost to a couple kids in this bracket, including Weber. And, so he's got to turn it around. But, I just think that it's going to be a meat grinder, especially on the top in this weight class.
DeGeorge lost to Nicky Polito too. He's another name in there. Spent time in our ND ranks. It's an unbelievable weight, and like you said, Bill, it's going to be unbelievable wrestling. 138 to me is a bit like 132, in that there's a ton of kids who could win. And if you told me before the season that Chase Connaught would be the top seed, I would have called you crazy. But look at the senior year he's had. He beat Caden Ricciardi at the Catholic Duels, and that's the most human I've ever seen Caden Ricciardi look. Every shot he took came up empty. I mean, Connaught had the answer for everything there. And then he had a huge February. He beat Adrian DeJesus, and then he pinned Carson Walsh at the buzzer last week. Absolutely ridiculous match. And I mentioned DeJesus, and obviously he's a 2-time state champion. The only time he's lost in the postseason, believe it or not, in his high school career was to Anthony Knox when he was a sophomore, ended up taking 3rd when he was with DePaul. But DeJesus isn't wrestling at 100%. We've said it before on the podcast. He has an upper body injury that he first suffered at the Beast of the East. He's wrestled through it. He's wrestled through a ton of pain, taken some lumps along the way. But, here he is, just a couple wins shy of his 3rd state title. And Ricciardi's going for number 2. He looks as motivated as ever since that loss to Connaught. And, he's overcome some back stiffness across the way, kept him out of the Escape the Rock tournament. Carson Walsh, 3-time medalist and a state finalist. And Bill will tell you that Chase Hansen is a stud. He doesn't lose, literally. I mean, he's only lost a couple matches his entire high school career. And then, a couple other good names in this class. I mean, Gideon Gonzalez is at a great freshman year for Bergen Catholic. He's impressed me all year long. Armani McCann from Jackson Liberty. It's good to see him healthy in the field. And Scotty Sari from Southern, he hasn't lost since in state since descending to 138. So this weight class is going to be a lot of fun, very similar to 132. And then 144, it's a deep weight, but everyone's going to be looking up at Sonny Amato here. And he was the 144-pound champ last year as a freshman. And he was at 150 for most of this year, and he came down. And we wanted that Jaden James, Sonny Amato 150-pound final. But ultimately, this is a good move for Amato because, as we've said, he kind of asserts himself here as the clear favorite at 144. Donnie Almeida from Pope John, 2-time state medalist. He's really good. He's undefeated. He had to sit out to start the year due to the NJSIA senior transfer rules, but he's unbeaten. He's unbeaten to start the year, and he's had a pretty good career overall. So he's another name to watch. Blaze Mealy, Anthony DePaul, Luke Galetta, Jake Zaltzman. All these kids are state medalists. Attila Vigilante picked up a big win over Jake Zaltzman in the Region 7 final. The Southern standouts had a good end to the year here. And Loudon Henry, state medalist, another one here at this weight. Ryan Mitchell from St. Joe's. He's had a heck of a start here to the season since sitting out to start the year due to the transfer rules, just like Almeida. And then Nick Schwartz from Del Barton. You might not like the record, but on the mat, he certainly does his job, and he's had a great year given the gauntlet schedule that he's wrestled in his first year with Del Barton. And then 150, I mean, to me, guys, it's the Jaden James show, and he's been an absolute menace. He's undefeated. He got a Powerade title, and you could tell how hungry he is to get his first state title. I remember the image of him his freshman year in the semifinals when he lost to Logan Roman, kind of near the buzzer, and Coach Stoll was holding him like a newborn kid. I mean, you could just see how distraught Jaden was that he lost that match. I want to say he was actually undefeated going into that match as well. Might have lost once. And then last year, he lost a competitive final to Caden Ricciardi at 138. And he's coming for his first title this year, and I don't know who's going to stop him. This is a talented weight class. You have, Jamar Dixon's the 3-time state medalist. Michael Kraft just beat Dixon in the region tournament there, Region 8. Alex Delorier from Raritan's had a good end of the year. Jackson Weller, he's got a region title as well. Rhett Washleski, Joey Ruiz, very proven kids, but I don't know who's stacking up with Jaden James here. Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say he's the overwhelming favorite, which is sometimes hard to say for someone that hasn't won a state title. But it is kind of shocking that he hasn't won one to this point. I mean, I know it's only been 2 years, but the way he's wrestled the regular seasons the last 2 years, I think he basically came into both of those tournaments as favorites or co-favorites, and to this point hasn't won. But I would be surprised if he didn't, especially this year. Just and like I said, a lot of other good wrestlers below him. On the other side of the bracket, the 2 and 3 seed, Jamar Dixon and from Delsea and Michael Kraft from Camden Catholic just met in the region final. Kraft won that in sudden victory. Dixon still ended up getting the 2 over Kraft, but they would be seeded to face each other again. Would be a pretty good matchup. Washleski, the 6th seed on that half of the bracket, is very he's a very tough wrestler that they could definitely get through to the final. I would not be surprised. Another guy on that side that maybe worth looking out for is Johnny Tirico. He's from St. Augustine. He's a freshman. Started the year as the number 5 seed in his district. Teched his way to a district final and ended up 3rd. And then the top half of the bracket, I don't see him beating Jaden James. I know he thinks he can. But Jackson Weller from Delran has been a breakout star for me this season. He has really beaten a lot of good wrestlers. I mean, there's about 6 or 7 guys with a lot of quality wins behind them that he's knocked off this year, and he is the number 4 seed. I believe he will be a state champ. I do not believe he will be a state champion this year, but I think down the road he's going to get one because he is that good. We could see him against Desmond Lenigan in the quarterfinals from St. John Vianney. That was a rematch of a Region 7 final that was decided on a stall call. I know it was a bit controversial, but I heard that the Weller had a couple potential takedowns in that match that were not called, and that he was pushing the pace. So I'm looking forward to seeing him and seeing how far he can go. He did not place last year. Again, I'd be surprised if he didn't get on the podium, and I'd be surprised if he wasn't a state champ at some point. But we do believe that Jaden James is the guy to beat.
157. And Bill, this is another weight that I know you want to talk about. And you mentioned a kid, who you think is going to win a state championship. I know you probably feel the same way about Cage Jones. This bracket's sensational. And to me, it's a handful or so names that are jousting for the top spot here. I mentioned Cage Jones, and he's one of the, pound for pound most explosive and relentless wrestlers in the state. And you have a kid in Wyatt Stout in that class as well, who's so tough to score on. Gavin Hawk, he's built like a Marine fighter pilot. I mean, he's just an absolute freak on the mat. And, he showed off his complete skill set on Saturday in West Milford. I was there when he beat Joey Canova from Bergen Catholic in the region final in what was an epic match. It absolutely lived up to the hype. And Canova hit a reversal early to start, and then Hawk, scored the next 6 points unanswered. Had a huge third period, had a big takedown, which at first wasn't ruled a takedown. Canova hurt his knee and called for injury time almost simultaneously, but the ref did end up rewarding him a takedown, and he didn't let Canova score the rest of the match. And then you also have guys like Max Nevlin, who's a state medalist from a year ago. Bubba Gavrich has had a great year. Trevor Jones is very battle tested. And then there's a couple more guys I'm excited to see. Bill, how are you evaluating this weight class?
You start at the top with Gavin Hawk. Obviously, he was a state finalist last year from Phillipsburg. As we've talked about before, for all the team success that the State Liners have had over the years, not many individual champions. It's been, I believe, 13 years since Brandon Hall won his title. At least on the boys' side, that they've had a girls' champ, Joel Gonzalez, but. We'll see if he can break that drought. Because it is a thing that we always kind of keep an eye for. If this is going to be year that the State Liners kind of break through and put a bunch of guys on the podium, and Hawk, is a Princeton commit, definitely has a chance to do that. And then, again, you go down to the bottom, and then you have Wyatt Stout and Cage Jones, and they wrestled in the first tournament of the year at the Robin Leff, and Stout won that 9-8. And I would think if they wrestled again, that would be another exciting matchup. I'm 6'2", and I don't look up at many 157 pounders, but I look up at Cage Jones. He says he's 6'3", but he looks a lot taller than that. I feel like every time I talk to him, he grows an inch or two. He's just long and lanky, and just has leverage like nobody else at that weight class. And he is so explosive and can pin anybody. He ran into Matt Henrik last year, the two-time state champ from Southern. And, Henrik is a very defensive wrestler, and basically was able to take away his offense. I don't know if there's anybody in this weight class that can do that to him. I would not be surprised if he won that state title. Just eluded him. Last year there was no South Jersey state champs for the first time in over 50 years. And I know there was a lot of kids that want to start a new streak this year. I think Cage Jones is at the top of that list. I think Sammy Spalding could do it. His teammate from Kim and Catholic in the 132-pound weight class. I think Chase Hansen potentially could at 138 pounds. I think there's a few guys from South Jersey that are probably going to be in that final and potentially win it this year. And just because of Cage Jones' length and explosiveness, he might be at the top of that list.
You look up at Cage Jones, I look up at Santino Rodriguez, and we'll get to him in the 165-pound class in a minute. Two just enormous kids, towering over other kids. But Joe, what do you make of 157?
Well, the one thing I wanted to mention is that it is Phillipsburg tradition that if you win a state title, you immediately go take a dip in the ocean, which is what Jewel Gonzalez did when she won her state title. So not only will it be interesting to see if he can navigate what is a really talented weight class, but if he does, then he gets to go celebrate by diving into the frigid ocean. So that's something to watch for too, Ryan.
Yeah, Gavin better pack a bathing suit, whether he likes it or not. 165, and 165 is another one of these, can anyone beat this kid type of weights? And there's a few more that I think we still have to get through here, but the name that everyone is looking up at here is Alessio Parrington. And Parrington's a two-time state champ, and since his freshman year, he's been an absolute beast. I actually don't believe he's lost in state since his freshman year. And up my way, Cole Dunham has had a great year for Pope John. He got hurt as a sophomore last year and missed most of the season, but he's wrestled like a kid who can make the podium. I mentioned Santino Rodriguez. He won a state medal as a freshman, and he was also, like Dunham, hurt last year, but he's back in the field. He did take a loss to AJ DeGiovanni from Bergen Catholic last week in the Region 1 final. DeGiovanni kind of dominated that match, flipped a rematch from a couple weeks ago to end the regular season. The two wrestled, and Santino beat him pretty handily. DeGiovanni beat him pretty handily this time. And ultimately, I just think Parrington's got to be the pick here. I mean, I know Joe likes a ton of these kids from the shore, and I got to see both, AJ Falcone and Cole Stangl this year, and I was very, very impressed. Jake Clayton from Point Pleasant Borough has had one heck of a year as well. But Parrington's just kind of separate from the pack, and he's been that way for the past couple years. Christian Joya from Governor Livingston and Tyler Whitford from St. Joe's Metuchen. I'm also keeping an eye on here. Joya is a state medalist for Governor Livingston. But to me, I mean, it's got to be Alessio Parrington here. Anything else would be an enormous upset, potentially the most enormous upset, with the exception to Anthony Knox that we could see here, if one of the top dogs lose. But at 175, I think Burton and Chapman, is the potential final matchup that everyone's looking at here. There's some other things I do want to touch on before I pass it over to Jake to talk about that potential matchup. Brock Ozerwitz avenged a loss to Torna Kajaya, and Gentia Drizzy did the same with Ethan Dalling. Both those kids won region titles and made their way back into our individual rankings. Andrew Bouchard from St. Joe's Met beat Anthony Verdi in a rematch in the Region 5 final. It's actually not a rematch. It's a rubber match. Verdi won the first two. It's the third match between the two this year. Verdi's 2-1 against him now. So there's, a couple names did some shuffling in our individual rankings, but ultimately, I think it's got to be Burton Chapman here, right, Jake?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty safe bet for the final. I know we were kind of split on who we think is going to win. And listen, for as great as Chapman is and as dominant as he's looked in his wins, I think the thing that's almost more encouraging for me is how he wrestled Harvey Luddington the second time. You know, the fact that he basically nearly beat Luddington, if not for a takedown in kind of the waning seconds of the third period. I mean, I know Joe has mentioned that Harvey told him Chapman's rise is ferocious, and he doesn't, and Luddington didn't know how anybody got out from it. So, you know, who knows if Chapman's in that position and his ride's in top form, you know, we could see what I think a lot of people would consider an upset. But, you know, again, this is another weight like 113 where I think you've got to look beyond the final. I mean, for me, you know, the one guy that catches my eye is St. John Vianney Jr., John Saraiva. He went from, you know, losing in the first round of regions as a freshman to placing sixth last year to winning his first career district and region title this year, first time in AC. And he's the 17th seed. And he's got Passaic Valley's Will Capizzi in the first round. And, you know, then he'll face Burton probably in the pre-quarters. But what I think is intriguing about Saraiva is he's wrestled a lot of these guys in this bracket already. And so he's got familiarity with them. So I think, you know, come consolation matches, you could see him go on a run there and certainly, you know, outplace his seed and get on the podium. You know, you mentioned Brock Osrowitz and Anthony Verdi, Timu Menbeleg from St. Benedict's. You know, there are 5 returning state medalists at this weight. So anytime that's the case, guys are going to be hungry to defend their spots on the podium. Guys are going to be hungry to prove that they can't, you know, improve upon where they finished last year. And then, you know, you've got some other intriguing names. You know, David Thompson's a kid for Pope John this year who's kind of burst on the scene for them. Has helped sort of anchor them in the upper weights. Enzo Triolo for Paramus Catholic's a freshman. You don't see many freshmen upper weights. So, you know, I think that'll be interesting. And then, you know, you look at, you know, a lot of the guys like Genti Adrizzi, Carmine Massey, guys who really have a chance to make a big statement, who have a chance for fireworks. I think that's going to be a really interesting potential, you know, pre-quarterfinal bout to watch. And then, you know, I don't know how far he'll go, but I just wanted to mention Mountain Lakes has a kid, Ronaldo Di Jacopo. He's a senior. His first time down there. He is 40-6. I don't think I've ever heard of a wrestler competing 46 times before the state tournament. So that's pretty impressive in and of itself. But yeah, you know, I think again, you know, with 5 state medalists in the field, with a lot of guys who were down there for the first time, looking to make a name for themselves, I think that this weight, you know, for as much as we think Burton Chapman final, and, you know, I know Ryan, you think Burton's going to win handily, like, you know, for as much as we think those things are a foregone conclusion, I don't think that means we should write off this weight. I think there's still a lot of potential intriguing matchups here.
I wouldn't say handily, but no, I would pick Burton if the two do match up in the final. But you mentioned Carmine Massey. I was very impressed with him and West Essex as a whole at Region 1. They were kind of a breath of fresh air there, and they made that region pretty tough. 190, the question everyone has at 190 is if anyone could stack up with Mr. Luddington. I mean, the Iowa commit is going for his 3rd state title, and no one in the field really has posed a serious threat, at least, you know, as big a threat as Chapman did the second time those two met in the Group 3 semis there, as Jake was referring to. Tanner Hodgins wrestled him somewhat tough. Vincenzo Laval in last year's final kept it close for a little, and then Luddington kind of opened it up. But in those 2 matches, I was never really like thinking, you know, oh, you know, Harvey could lose this. I will say Laval has been seeking out this matchup. He could have gone 215 because he did it a bunch this year, but he wants 190 and he wants a chance at Luddington. CJ Betts from Del Barton wrestled Laval pretty close in the Region 3 final. It was a 4-3 decision, and I know Joe likes Alex Reyes a lot from Homedale, and I'm personally a big Caleb Jackson guy. He's wrestled through a lot of adversity this year for St. Joe's, a couple injuries that he's working through, but Luddington here is just such a tough out. Joe, do you think there's, you know, any vulnerability here for Harvey?
Well, you guys have been busting my chops for the last 3 or 4 days, how vulnerable he is. And I think the reason Hodgins is able to keep bouts close, he lost Luddington twice, 7-3, is because Hodgins has great leg defense. Harvey's going to, you know, go in with those lower leg attacks. And if you can fend him off, you can stay in the bout. Hodgins does not have enough offense to beat Harvey Luddington. Now, they could meet again because Hodgins is in the upper bracket. I don't know if he'll get through to the semi, but, down the bottom, there's some pretty good wrestlers down there with Laval. Evan Matishus from Bosco's down there. Carmen Morano from St. Peter's Prep is down there. And, it's nice to want a rematch, and maybe you think Harvey's not at his best. And listen, he said after the first loss to Hodgins, he goes, I need to step up my conditioning, and I will assume that he has. But, I also think that Harvey may have been a little bit bored. He really wasn't challenged except for Chapman twice, and maybe he was looking ahead or took something for granted. I do not see him doing that in Atlantic City. I think he wants to become the first three-time winner for Brick Memorial. So, I don't think we're going to see the Harvey Luddington who struggled in all of 3 bouts this year. I think we're going to see the relentless attacker in this tournament.
215, and the big fish in the pond here is Anthony Harris from St. Joe's, and the last time he wrestled in this tournament was 2023, and he was a state runner-up to Michael Delegata that year at 190 pounds. Now he wrestles for the school that Michael Delegata wrestled for, and he's an Oklahoma commit, just like his teammate John McGinty. And you guys saw Anthony Harris at Rutgers, and he's built like an NFL linebacker right now, and he's healthy after a season-ending knee injury last year. He put Nico Gonzalez from Mount Olive to his back in the Region 2 final, which is nothing to shrug about because Nico Gonzalez is a really good wrestler there for the Marauders. But it's great seeing Harris healthy. But there's a kid in this weight class who told me at Region 1 that he thinks he can beat him, and that's Dante DeLuca from Don Bosco Prep. And DeLuca was a region champ for the second year in a row, and he's unbeaten. He's one of the state's few unbeaten wrestlers still out there. And I think that, this weight you also have to look at a kid in Anthony Jackson from Paul VI, who's been a video game on the mat, just pinning everyone, teching everyone. When you see a major decision from him, you raise your eyebrow. That's the kind of year he's had. I know Bill loves him. Joe got to see him at Region 7 last week. And Jake, I know he has your attention as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's 30-0. I think 23 of his wins have been by pin. The other 7 have been by forfeits, I'm pretty sure. And every single one of his pins has been in the first period. So there's dominant, and then there's what Anthony Jackson's been doing. And, it's hard to contend with somebody like that who just gets on you so quickly, who, can kind of change things and turn things on a dime like that. It's tough to prepare for, and it's hard to really simulate in practice or anything like that. So, I think that makes him a super formidable foe. And, again, DeLuca's undefeated. So you've got, 3 guys in this weight who are all undefeated. So, that always makes things exciting. And then, you look at somebody like the 4 seed, Nate Faxon from Governor Livingston. He's 37-1. He made the blood round last year. Somebody like Rocco Salerno from Seton Hall Prep. He's the 3 seed. He was a state medalist last year. He took 7th in the state. And then, you look at guys who've kind of burst onto the scene this year. Nico Gonzalez from Mount Olive. I know Ryan has impressed you at a lot of points. He's only got a couple of losses. One of them was up at heavyweight, but at 215, he's been, pretty untouchable. Elbrus Majiga for Del Barton. Anytime you see somebody in a green wave singlet, it's hard to look past them and count them out. Highland Park, Noah Berlin Langston had a region champ at Region 5, which, when you think of GMC wrestling, you think South Plainfield, you think St. Joe's Metuchen. You don't necessarily think Highland Park, but he's 37-2 this year. He hasn't lost since the Sam Cali when he lost to Sal Marquez from Delsey, who's also a state qualifier. And, he's the 17 seed. So if he wins, he'll get Anthony Harris in the first round. But considering he's only the program's 4th ever state qualifier, it's got to feel like a win for him just even being down at Boardwalk Hall, especially for a program like that. But, again, I think there are some other kids here, especially in the shore. Timmy O'Rourke, freshman from Howell, he was ranked for us for a good chunk of the year. Trey Talmadge from Brick Memorial, that's a name with a lot of history at that school. So there are always expectations there. Obviously, we mentioned Marchese. Guy Elsner from Paramus Catholic transferred from Tenafly. He took third in Region 4. He missed basically all of last year with a torn labrum. So I know in talking to him, like he's super excited to get down there. Trent Levash from Bridgewater Raritan, who's a dangerous 26 seed. He's only a sophomore, but Coach Kyle Murphy told me at the Somerset County tournament when Levash won that he's like one of the most improved wrestlers. He's one of the rare upperweights who doesn't play football. He only wrestles. So I think, there are a lot of, again, kind of really interesting matchups if you're able to look, beyond the final. And if you care about, things like who's going to get on the podium and, who's going to potentially spring an upset here or there. I mean, Gonzalez and Majaga could meet again. Gonzalez beat Majaga by decision earlier this year. So, I think you'll see a lot of good wrestling at this weight, even beyond just the final, which I think should be a great one.
On to heavyweight. And I think here, Stella got against the field, and you look at what he did the other day against James Lynch from Tom's River East, who's a beast, and he teched him. And, I look at the rest of this weight class, and Benji Shu is on a tear since his close loss to Delegata in the non-public quarters. And he's taken a bit of a relaxed approach, the rest of the season. He's kind of saying, hey, I'm a track guy in college. I'm going to Texas to throw shot put and discus. So I'm kind of just out here having fun. And he's using that angle to his advantage. And to me, he's kind of trying to put the losses to Alvarez and Delegata in the rear view. And I kind of wonder what a Delegata Alvarez matchup would look like. Alvarez is getting, FBS football scholarships, and he's got legit size. He's all of 285. He's 6'4", and just a towering kid there on the mat. And that's why, Anthony Knox, he calls Delegata a big teddy bear, but he kind of wrestles like he's still 175 pounds. And that's what makes him so special at heavyweight. And, as big as Alvarez is, Delegata's got that mobility and, that flexibility that still gives him an advantage. And that's why I think he's the favorite at this weight. And then you have Vinciguerra from Woodstown, Mateo Vinciguerra, Clifford Dirks from Ocean City, and Lynch, like I said, from Tom's River East. Matt Smith from Rumson won a title, and Ben Zuba. We talk about Alvarez being big. Ben Zuba, Joe, you say it all the time how big he is. But with a lot of these kids being short kids, what do you make of this weight?
Well, I really, for the first time over the weekend, got to see Rocco up close. And he's an interesting kid. He has the earphones in and he walks around and he paces the whole tournament and he's always got a smile on his face. His first appearance in the state tournament came in 157 pounds. He wrestled as a freshman. Now he's all of 260. But, the one thing about him is he's not really tall. So it's hard for other wrestlers to get under him for takedowns if there are the other wrestlers in this tournament who actually shoot. He's going to remind fans of Jimmy Mullen and Luis Fernandez, who won the state title for Voorhees a couple of years ago and is now up at Cornell, in that his biggest asset is speed. So when he wrestled Lynch from Tom's River East, who's all of 6'5", 6'6", 280 pounds, he was like the gnat buzzing around his ear. And Lynch couldn't swat him away. He just scored takedowns. He uses what leverage he has very well. And he's technical. He's not just a heavyweight who's going to dance around and tie up with the other guy. He's actually going to wrestle. And while Alvarez may know what he can do, I look at it as a double-edged sword. Yeah, he knows what he can do. But the bad news is, yeah, he knows what he can do. Good
point, Joe. That's a very good point. That'll do it for episode number 9 of Weighing In, your go-to New Jersey high school wrestling podcast. Bill and Joe have talked about this group of seniors that we have this year, and they compare it to the legendary class of 2006. So in a way, this week is kind of bittersweet as we say goodbye to a lot of the kids who have made this sport so awesome the past 4 years. Anthony Knox, Harvey Luddington, Alessio Parrington, Ryan Burton, Adrian DeJesus, Rocco Delegata, Caden Ricciardi, and many more. This is going to be their send-off. So we look forward to what's to come these next few days. And you can follow along with us in Atlantic City as we'll be live streaming the action on every mat all 3 days at Boardwalk Hall. We thank you, listeners, for tuning into episode 9. And as always, our producer, Brian Decon, for putting this production together. The next time you hear from us, we'll be doing a big picture season recap later this month at the end of the year. Take care, everyone.